Kevin Masters, and he is retired deputy chief.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Kevin, what is your leadership position, or was your leadership position with the group that you're involved in?
With Aim for Peace, my leadership position was being a conduit through the police department as a deputy chief. My role is policymaking, being a resource for funding, being a resource to try to impact public policy so that things can be implemented on a broader scale toward whatever that mission is. So within the police department, with respect to the Aim for Peace process, it was about policymaking, policy development, governance development, funding, trying to identify funding sources, and also trying to obtain funding sources so that we can actually provide the programs and services that we wanted to provide.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. How long have you, or did you, hold this position?
Well, I was a deputy chief for about 12 years. Of that, probably 2 years was involved in the Aim for Peace process. And I came on not necessarily midstream, but maybe when they were about 25% into the development of the idea, development of the concept is when I met Tracy McClendon Cole and the people who were working diligently to get it done, and that's when I became involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What leadership responsibilities were involved with the position that you did hold regarding the Aim for Peace organization?
With the position I held as the deputy chief in the police department, initially under the patrol bureau and then in investigations, the leadership really surrounded the kind of things I spoke about previously. What is Aim for Peace? What's the branding look like as it relates to the mission, which is stop the killing, stop the shooting? What is the municipal police department, Kansas City Police Department? What's our role in this whole process? How can we be a resource? How can we be a support? How can we be a catalyst? And I think that's probably one of the things that maybe I was the most instrumentally involved in, is how can my rank, more so than anything as a deputy chief, help Tracy and the people trying to develop this plan be a catalyst to move it forward as a representative from the police department. More often than not, when you have your police department behind a program like this, supporting a program like this, and saying, we need this to help us, that kind of helps move it along.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you see Aim for Peace doing for the Kansas City community as a whole? Like, how do you see it affecting the community, and what, from your take of being a part of the police department?
The way I see it, the mission: stop the shooting, stop the killing. Obviously, it's what everybody wants, especially once I looked at the research and recognized that in certain geographical boundaries and certain zip codes, people are dying from violent crime more so than just natural deaths. Violent crime being the biggest contributor to death in certain communities is just not acceptable. What I saw with Aim for Peace and the way we process it in the police department is, it's a tool. You have a toolbox, and you use every tool at your disposal to try to resolve whatever it is you're trying to resolve. So what I see, the process, the people, the concept, the philosophy, Aim for Peace is another tool that's in the toolbox that, when working in collaboration with public safety, when working in collaboration with other city entities to help correct broken windows theories, it's another tool, and it's a great tool to help to utilize stop the killings. And one of the things that was most important to me as a police officer, I recognize, and I used an example when I talked to the city council, when I talked to mayors back then. Here's a situation from a real life situation from a police perspective. I get a call that there's a disturbance at 27th and Euclid. I get to 27th and Euclid, and oh yeah, there's a disturbance, but it stopped. I get out of my car, I can see there's no law that's been broken, there's really nothing for the police to do, but there's still two combating factions there that's extremely hot, it's an extremely volatile situation, but I'm at a point that there's nothing I can do. I'm there to protect the public, to enforce the laws, but when nothing's happening, there's nothing for me to do. But I recognize this is a bad situation. The minute I leave, something's gonna happen. Prior to Aim for Peace, the police didn't have a tool in the toolbox to deal with a situation like that. And that's why we saw the value, the relevance of it. That gave us a tool to say, hey, this is the police, we're 27th and Euclid, there's been a disturbance over here, there's nothing going on right now, it's still hot. The minute we leave, something bad's gonna happen. Can somebody come over and see if you guys can resolve this in a way that we can't? That's the value of Aim for Peace for the police department here in Kansas City.
Great, that was a perfect explanation. Why did you begin to serve as a leader within the police department?
Part of it was a calling. Public service. I mean, it's in me. I'm a product of an urban environment. I'm a product of a public school system. Just seeing everything that's out there, being exposed to everything that's out there from a police perspective. And we're exposed to a lot more than most people. It kind of was a calling. That and I love people. And with the Aim for Peace mission, once I learned about it, once I heard what it is they were trying to do, once I learned about the methodology, the research that was done, and learned that this is something that had worked in other communities, we just needed to kind of hybrid it for our particular community. It was just a natural fit for me. It's like, you know what, this is a great tool. We need this here. If it's worked somewhere else to stop the killing, predominantly in the urban core with people of color, I have a role, I have a responsibility. And as a leader, a formal leader, the rank of deputy chief in the police department, it's my responsibility really to do everything I can to help provide additional tools, additional resources to help the community as well as the department. So part of it was a calling and part of it was truly a responsibility.
Okay. Now you're talking about tools and resources and things like that. What kind of resources kind of in your community support you in being that effective leader within the police department and even in collaboration with Aim for Peace?
Yeah. I think the most effective resources are caring people who live in our community. There are a lot of matriarchs, there are a lot of patriarchs, there are a lot of caring adults who live, and most of the police services, it's not to say that we're not all over the city, because we are, but the reality is most of the calls for service, most of the police services occur in the urban core. And probably my biggest resource, my most valuable tool is whenever I walk into a room or whenever I'm driving down the street and I see that there are other caring people who care about their community and just trying to do a good job, that energizes me. And of course the other things are the support I give both as a formal leader but also just being Kevin Masters. I think the relationships, the collaborations, the partnerships, and just visually seeing all the people who truly care and try to make it better, that's what recharges my battery, and that is one of my biggest tools to help things move along.
Describe an example that you are especially proud of when you were particularly able to serve the community and residents to really make a difference.
Not because we're talking about Aim for Peace, I can almost use that as an example in some respects. It's a brainchild of some research. It's a brainchild where somebody said, you know what, there's a whole lot of killing in Kansas City. What can we do to make this better? It wasn't an easy task, and it's still not an easy task, because when you talk about trying to identify anywhere from $600,000 to $1 million to bring together a staff, equipment, and everything you need for an operation like that to run, that's not already in the city budget as a line item, it's no easy task to convince policymakers to, there's only one pie, to maybe take a little bit out of this piece to put over here. Aim for Peace is really one of those examples where a lot of people, and for me the value was a lot of neighborhood people, a lot of community people, researchers, people from city government, people from county government, people from the police department. And the nice thing I think for me about the police department, we didn't sit at the table and say this is what needs to be done and this is how it's going to be done. We said, how can we help? And that was a great example of stakeholders from a very broad spectrum, first and foremost identifying we have a huge problem and it's all of our problems. let's sit down, let's talk about ways that maybe we can impact it in a good way. We did that. So the Aim for Peace process, you know, as painful as it was, as you know, we had some of my highest highs and some of my lowest lows were really in this process. The highest highs, obviously, once it came to fruition. The lowest lows is, you know, hearing, well, the city's not going to fund it, or we can't find the money to do this. How can you not find money to invest in stopping people from killing one another? So this was really a good example of probably some of my highest highs and highest lows in terms of a process that went well from a leadership perspective, from a collaboration, from a partnership. This was a great example of this process.
Great, that was a great answer. Let's do, this will be the last question because you've covered so much and it's been great. What barriers in your community or group hinder or challenge your effective leadership? You were talking about the funding a little bit earlier. Can you expand a little bit on some more barriers that maybe kind of challenge that?
Absolutely, and one of my frustrations with Kansas City, and well, it's probably most municipalities, but one of my frustrations in terms of barriers are people barriers. Most of our problems, most of our issues, they're never going to be enough resources. Most of them have truly been people issues from a standpoint of, you know, sometimes people want power, sometimes people want acknowledgement, sometimes people want to, you know, they've got their bread basket and their tools and they don't want to share those things. Sometimes people who have been, and it's not to take anything away from people because we've got some senior people in both city government, county government, and my police department that laid the foundation for any great things we're going to accomplish down the road. Sometimes those barriers are, and in this process we experienced it. You know, I'll be candid, we experienced it, is when those people who have laid the foundation aren't prepared, or better so, aren't willing to start the succession process. That part where it's like, hey, thank you, you did a great job, teach me what I need to know so that I can carry it to the next level. Teach me what I need to know, give me the tools, give me the latitude and authority, hand me the baton, and let me take this race to another level. One of my biggest barriers, or one of the things that I've identified, you know, and I'm going to say it, in Kansas City city government sometimes, in Kansas City county government sometimes, even in the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, and definitely in the urban community, is we have people who aren't willing to pass the baton. I mean, we have a lot of, and Tracy's one of them. You know, I hate to mention her particularly, but she's one of them. We have a lot of very bright, very educated, very articulate, very passionate young people who want to do their part. And we have the senior people who won't step to the side to give them that opportunity to take us to that next level. I think that has been, in some respects, a detriment to this community. I think it's something that sometimes people don't want to talk about, but there's got to be succession. Some of the senior leaders, you know, like myself, which is one of the reasons I'm retired now, because I recognize after 27 years in the police department, the technology is different, the social problems are different, the way people communicate with all these tech, that's different. Hopefully I can pass what I know to someone else who's younger than me